Good afternoon, everyone on site in Tiedekulma. Glad you made it just in time to escape the rain that is apparently starting outside. And also welcome to everyone online, either live or watching a recording. My name is Teemu Roos. I work at the Finnish Center for AI, where I'm the leader of the AI education program. And today we're going to talk about diverse pathways to ethical and inclusive tech futures. And we have here a special event and announcement as well, since we're now starting the Finnish Center for AI, FCAI, has made a partnership with the Women in AI Ethics organization. And we're very proud to host Shah-Dand, who is the founder and CEO of Women in AI Ethics. I will also introduce my co-moderator, co-host, Nitin, who is a professor of practice at Aalto University at the CS department. And we'll start with a sort of a fireside chat. There's no fireplace here, but we'll have the chat nonetheless between Nitin and Mia, and then we'll have a panel to follow that. So I give the floor to Nitin and Mia.
Thank you.
Welcome, everybody, and I'm delighted to be here. I'm also delighted to have Mia joining us all the way from California on a long trip to spend time with us in Helsinki. So if you get a chance, please meet her after the talk and get to know her. She's had a wonderful trajectory in the work she's done, but also prior to that, I was very curious to hear more about Mia's personal background and her trajectory coming into the field that she's in, because she's working at the intersection of many interesting areas around ethics, AI, technology, and how we think of inclusion and diversity. As you'll get to hear more of Mia's path, I think it'll help us think about how we have to operationalize these principles and practices in our own work. So maybe I'll start by asking you, Mia, a little bit about personally how you've arrived at all of this and your path so far.
Thank you so much. It's so wonderful to be here. Thank you, Teemu, for hosting us, and thank you, Nitin, for organizing this great event. This is my first trip to the Nordics. So I'll start my personal journey by relating to you. My journey is a tale of two countries. I grew up in India, and what's unique about my background is for a lot of folks who talk about patriarchy, sexism, they experience it the first time they go out into the real world, school, workplace. But growing up, I grew up in a very patriarchal society. So it was day one. You're born into an environment and you're born into a family where a woman is lesser than. She's always lesser than. So that's what I experienced. That's what I went through as I was younger. I say this jokingly, but it's actually quite serious. I was bred to breed. So my one role was to get married, take care of, have babies, take care of everyone. So my journey started in a very unusual place as I followed that pathway that was laid out for me. And I got married at a young age, and I migrated to the United States. So there starts the phase two of my journey. Two countries. You would think they're very dissimilar, but turns out not so much. I went back to school. I love to learn. I love to study. So I got away from a very patriarchal society, so I thought. And I went back, got a bachelor's degree. I got a master's degree. I was pregnant when I went to graduate school. The only reason I could go to graduate school is because I got a scholarship. And I graduated, which I was very happy about, is with a baby and my master's. So fast forward to 2016, when things changed. And that's when a lot of women came to a realization that maybe we are not as progressive as we thought. So as you might remember, 2016 was the presidential election. A very qualified woman was on the ballot. She was a Democratic nominee. And we had Donald Trump, who was a lifelong Democrat before he jumped over, became a Republican, and they were both on the ballot. So 2016 was the year when he was elected, and it felt very personal. There were so many women, as you might remember from the news, there was protests and the women in pink hats. Everybody was protesting, there are a lot of women who felt it was a betrayal. Because what happened was, you think you live in a democracy and you feel you take certain rights for granted. And it turned out they weren't. Those rights weren't guaranteed. So 2016 was devastating for a lot of us. In my personal life, around 2018, I lost both my parents. And I was struggling. I was having an existential crisis, trying to figure out, like, what is my legacy? Because at a certain point in your life, as you lose your loved ones, you start thinking, what is the legacy? What do I want to leave behind? What is my leave behind? And I actually had a bottle of wine open. I was just sitting there. I was working on a project on AI. I was researching something, and suddenly I see this woman, it was Joy Bulwini, and her work. 2018 was when they released the paper, which was Gender Shades.
She's a graduate student at MIT, for people who don't know her background.
Incredible, like, brilliant woman, along with Dr. Timnit Gebru and Deb Raji. These women use their own lived experiences, their skin colors, right? Like their darker skin tones to start testing some of the technologies that were being released and realize that these don't actually work for us. So it's just an experience, it's an example of how the personal experiences and our own self that we are not encouraged to bring into work, into school, is often the reason why technology changes, why technology gets better. So 2018 was the year I published the first 100 Brilliant Women in AI Ethics list. And a lot of folks that we know in common, such as Joy Bulwini, Timnit Gebru, I think Billy Murray is also on that list, Virginia Dignam is on the list. And that just blew open this entire space in that I was not sure when I published it what the response would be. But it turns out there were so many women in the space who were working not on just AI or the hype of AI, but they were actually working on the ethics of AI. Now, my background has always been, when I landed in United States, I landed in California. This was a time where eBay was the big kahuna. So we are talking like back in the day, right? Facebook, nobody cared because everybody thought Mark Zuckerberg is just trying to get dates. Nobody cared. Jeff Bezos was this crazy person who's building warehouses. Like, why is he building warehouses? Like, this is the digital age. So it was a very crazy space. So I succeeded. I had a great career. I worked at large tech companies. But when I hit 2018, it all changed for me. I've been seeing consistently in my life the parallels between the country I grew up in, I was born in, and the country that I live, I've called my home. Women are nowhere to be seen. They're working behind the scenes. So many women that when they appeared on that list, this is so nice to be recognized because we're always in the shadows. That we are doing this work but nobody cares because it's not making millions. We are not saying this is going to make you millions. This is saying stop, slow down. So that is the story of women in AI ethics, the tale of two countries, and how across where we're finding this cross-country solidarity, I feel like cross-continent solidarity between women and the challenges that they face. So
maybe you can point us to a couple of challenges you've had in kind of framing the whole initiative, because there's obviously an AI ethics dimension of this that you're interested in, but you're also interested in diversity, inclusion, and it's not just only about women, but it's also about people with underrepresented backgrounds and diversity, not only in terms of their ethnic backgrounds or gender, but it's diversity in terms of the work they do, how they do it, why women should be at the table, why they represent particular worldviews and different ways of thinking about these topics. So maybe you can talk about all of those dynamics you've had to unpack through your initiative, and where is it going from there?
Great question. There's a longer answer, but we have limited time, so I'll give you the short version. And I would love to talk more about it later as well. So, has anyone here grown up poor? Yeah, you can't simulate that. to build empathy, like you have to understand, when you say walk in the shoes of some person, what it means to be poor, what it means to be a woman, what it means to be a trans woman. These are experiences which are so intrinsic to us. But I feel like that's what we bring to the table. So when we talk about diversity, it's not just about filling the room with, I just wrote about it, it's live on Medium. We're not trying to fill the room with female fascists and female tyrants. We're not trying to replace all the bad men with bad women. That's not diversity.
It's happening in our elections in Europe for some reason.
That's this wave, right? And we're saying girl boss. I mean, we're not trying to build like a pipeline, girl boss to fascism. We're trying to build diversity in a way that it acknowledges what people bring to the table. And it can be your personal lived experiences, like Dr. Bulwini's skin color. Like, that had a huge impact. Like, speaking of real world impact, she was able to get IBM to opt out of the facial recognition business. And this is a multi-billion-dollar company, and one woman can do it. So that gives you hope. So there's one. And then there is the part that multidisciplinary backgrounds play. So when we do our events, we look across not just here's another data scientist, here's another data scientist, which is all good, it's wonderful. But we look at psychologists, we look at physicists, we invite social scientists, we invite astronomers, physicists, neuroscientists, because if we are building these technologies with just one discipline, there are so many gaps. We leave so many ethical gaps because what one person brings from, say, I'll give you an example. We invited a sex worker to our last event. And the reason we did it is because sex workers are the first ones on any digital platform. They were the first ones to adopt cryptocurrencies. Because those on the margins and those on the fringes are most likely not to be able to take advantage of the mainstream technologies. So they are willing to try, they're willing to innovate, and it's also safer for them to be digital. So a lot of sex workers went virtual. But the problem is, the moment these platforms become popular, they're kicked off, those platforms. So that becomes a big issue, but we would never, I call them the canaries in the coal mine. When you get representation from groups who are traditionally not your cis white men in the room, all of a sudden you realize there are gaps, there are holes, there are actually things that make the difference between life and death. And I could go on and on, but I do put it all in my weekly newsletter. And I have to say, it is the most depressing newsletter.
It's also widely read. And apparently you get a lot of traction from it.
I do, and I'm amazed. And I'm actually pleasantly surprised that people do want to know. Because wouldn't you rather talk about exciting things like satellites, right? Let's put more satellites, Starlink, rocket ships. But then to talk about, hey, do you know the environmental impact of this technology? Or you're putting so many satellites up there, the astronomers are having a problem because they can't see the stars. So I don't want my child to grow up and wonder, Mom, is that a star? Is that Superman? Or is that is it a SpaceX satellite? So what kind of a world are we building if we just look to one group of experts? And which is why the diversity, like you said, comes in so many different forms. And I think we'll be better off if we were to acknowledge that.
So you started this work in the belly of the beast. You're in Silicon Valley, in the tech bro culture. It's sort of like even Europe looks at Silicon Valley as a kind of role model for startup culture. What challenges and opportunities have you confronted initiating this there? Now this is becoming more global, but let's start with the Silicon Valley context.
Sure. That's an interesting one because I was at an event hosted by the Thomas Mann at the Thomas Mann House in LA, and it was a German audience. And they had the same question. What can we learn from Silicon Valley?
Or what should we unlearn?
And it is very hard because these aren't flawed systems. Silicon Valley is not as much of a flawed system. It's intentionally designed to incentivize bad behavior. And what I mean by that is the motto of Silicon Valley is to move fast, break things. It sounds amazing. When you're a new person in Silicon Valley, it's super exciting. You go in and you're filled with enthusiasm and excitement. But then you realize the things you're breaking are people. So if the incentive model is built to encourage that, then how do you build an alternative model which says, no, you should care about the people, even if it's at the expense of the incentive system that's really working very well. So it's not been an easy discussion because there's been a lot of ethics washing. We are one of the few organizations who does not take big tech money, which is why we're also smaller. We are one of the smaller ones. We punch way above our weight because we have representation from all the big tech companies, women who work there, because they need us, they need solidarity, need support, but we don't take big tech money because there's so much money already in the university system, in the research system, because the universities cannot compete with their deep pockets. So that's been a real challenge, just the brain drain. So the conversations were easy as long as you're complicit with ethics washing, diversity washing. But the moment the conversation started getting real, people started getting fired. Dr. Dimna Gabru is a hero of mine, and she's spoken at several of our events. She pointed out, when she worked at Google, she authored a paper which is on the environmental impact of large machine learning models. And these large language models have a huge environmental impact. They also are prone to racist biases. And we are amplifying and we're replicating that. And the backlash was that she got fired, people from her team got fired. They moved that. She was the head of the ethical AI team. She was the founding leader. She got moved. So these conversations come at a cost. Companies are more willing to give you money if you're willing to go along with whatever the agenda is. So I feel like on one hand, it's been great because I've been surrounded by these amazing women. There's a lot of power in that. The bad news is, as I talked to Dr. Safiya Noble is another hero of mine, and she wrote the book, Algorithms of Oppression. And when we had our last conversation, and she said, what we really need is money. We need funding. But how many tech companies who have all the money are going to give you money to say, hey, your business model is flawed? So right now, where we are with ethics, we are just working around the edges. Because to really challenge things to be done a different way, it has to come from the outside, which will have to come from the startup space.
Investors and the shareholders.
The pressure will have to come from the outside because there is no incentive system that I know of today that's going to motivate them to change, and outside, and also I would say government. So Margaret Vestager at the Danish, I'm butchering her name, but she's a EU commissioner from Denmark, brilliant woman, and I spoke at the same event that she did last week, and she's big on regulating big tech. And I feel maybe that's where it's going to come from. Maybe that we need regulation, better laws to protect the people. But I think we are deluding ourselves if we think that change is only going to come from within, unless it's coming from the workers, because Google employees, Alphabet employees, Amazon employees, they're all unionizing, so that gives me hope. But we are not expecting that people who are benefiting from the system are going to somehow get up tomorrow and say, okay, we're going to change this. But hopefully that answers your question, and which is why I'm here. And I live in New York now.
So I'm going to transition into talking more about your initiative. It's an organization that's a nonprofit as well. And what are some planks and what are some areas that you have been kind of pushing? There's obviously a list you run, and I'm going to ask you a little bit more about that. But generally, can you talk about the range of activities your organization is involved in?
Sure. There are 3 pillars to women in AI ethics: representation, recognition, and empowerment. So representation is elevating the voices that are not heard. So our list is not just who's who in this industry or this space, but women who are not necessarily recognized because they don't work at a big tech, or if they're not working at some well-known university. So we really go out and find those women. It is a self-nomination process. I encourage you all to submit yourself, self-nominate, and also nominate women that you know in your circles, because we use that as a resource. It goes into a directory so that we can then present those women, and we can recommend those women to speak at events and also help them get hired, get grants and funding, and so on. So that's one. So one is the representation. The recognition is, representation and recognition will go hand in hand. The more women we can recognize, more we can encourage people to really include them in their workforce, and so on. And then the third is empowerment. So now this is where we are going to double down, is empowerment through education. So the FCAI partnership is really relevant because we want to change the way we think of education. So what is the purpose of education, right? If you look in any, I'll give you a very US-centric perspective because I've only just arrived here. But it's always been for jobs, get hired. But what if the role of education was redefined to protect yourself? Like we talk about AI literacy, but I don't want to just be using a phone. I want to know, is this app tracking me? How do I protect myself? Is my content being, like, my private information gathered without my consent? So how do we reimagine AI education, AI literacy, to think more about keeping ourselves safe, keeping our community safe, and then empower us to do work in areas that matter to us? Meaningful jobs. So one of the things we like to do is work on creating more course materials which center the work of women of color. Because so many women writing great research papers, they're writing books, they're authoring a lot of good content, but it never reaches anyone because the first person they invite to this event is like, let's just grab a dude. Speaking of Dr. Timnit Gebru and Joy Boluvini, they worked on the facial recognition system, and they authored this paper. And yet when the media interviewed them for the 60 Minutes show, which is a very popular, credible show, they did not interview them. It was their work, and they invited, anybody want to guess who they invited? This is an easy one. They invited a white dude. They invited a man to come talk about the work they've done. So we have to create more pathways. So when I say pathways, it's even making sure the media is not constantly erasing their work, and we want to play a bigger role. We are a smaller organization, but with partnerships and through just our community, we want to take it to the next level, that we can be more of a support system and champions for the women in our community.
So that's a great segue to find out how you met Teemu. And Teemu, would you like to come here so that we can bring you into the conversation?
Sure, exercise is good.
How did you guys meet, and how did this exciting new partnership with FCAI emerge, and what is planned more concretely?
From my point of view, I can say that I met Mia. Well, I knew her work, but I was contacted by her with a very sort of pleasant invitation to join the board of the Women in AI Ethics and take part in sort of selecting people for the list. So that's the short of it. And of course, I was very happy about that. I immediately answered that yes, of course. But of course, I also said that okay, I have some questions. And one of them was, for instance, that I generally don't like lists because they are always exclusive. And then this particular one, I mean, even though it has 100 names on it, it's still the 101st person is not on the list. But then, you know, Mia convinced me that that the point is not to exclude anyone, and then especially the rule that it's every year different set of people, so that you can't have the usual suspects on the top of the list every year, and that sort of that was the answer that I that I needed. And then yeah, we've been thinking thereafter how to work together, and my work in open education with the Elements of AI course and so on has been one sort of angle that we've tried to find synergies between, and you know, this education aspect is really something that I'm very keen to pursue.
He had a lot of questions. It was not an easy yes. It's like, who's going to be included? Is it going to be exclusive? And is this really egalitarian? And he had a lot of good questions, and we're so thrilled to have him on board. Thank you. So what attracted me to your profile was that you actually believe in democratizing AI. That's key, because every Silicon Valley company says they do that, I don't think what this mean by democracy is what it actually
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly the case. And I've also found this to be sort of a bit annoying, or at least confusing, let's say, that when people say they want to democratize AI, they usually mean offering tools into people's hands. So let's say they're giving them open source or perhaps not open source, closed source software to be so that people could use them, which is great. Like we all love these tools. We like to use our deep learning technology, and open source is a nice thing. But of course, that's a very different thing from democratizing the technology somehow inherently. It's just giving people access to the tools that are developed in a very exclusive environment. What I mean by democratizing AI is really democratizing the discussion around AI, so that we would have everybody like walking in the street and then walking somewhere else than this downtown Helsinki region, sort of everywhere in the country, everywhere in the world, have the enough knowledge so that they could form an informed opinion. And it's like forming an informed opinion, I think, is the first step for them to be engaged in the debates, and then that is sort of that's what I mean by democratizing.
It also has a diversity inclusion component to it, because then we bring different people from different backgrounds onto the table where they can make decisions together, and not just be at the receiving end of technology or a service. Part of your coursework is not a very basic level. It also has many advanced components where you can get a full. I mean, one of my PhD students said the reason she came into she has a law background, but the reason she came into work in the computer science department is she took your course, and gave her enough confidence to be able to feel like she can be at the table with computer scientists, which is a pretty big deal.
That's a big deal. That alone, this story alone, would have sort of been enough to sort of motivate me putting in the work in that course. So that's exactly what we want. I was just yesterday in an event that was meant for freshmen at the University of Helsinki, and then there was a question by one of the freshman students asking how do you get to do research, especially if it's related to machine learning or things like that. And then they were given the answer by one of my colleagues that, okay, you need to first study a lot of mathematics. So you need to study a lot of mathematics in your undergrad, and then if you have a very, very solid, strong mathematical technical background, then you could become an AI researcher. And I sort of, again, I had a question, right? And so I sort of raised my hand a little bit and said, okay, that's kind of true. If you want to develop the AI, the machine learning algorithms themselves, then you really have to you have to have a solid math background and other sorts of technical skills. But then that's not the only AI researcher model that we have, especially nowadays. That there's a lot of people, lawyers, and social scientists, doctors, nurses, artists, that can become AI researchers, and they can contribute to the team, and they can sort of make it their own work. And I think this is really important to understand. It's diversity in terms of people's backgrounds.
So why would you want to bring Mia into this partnership? What does she bring that FCAI is missing? What is exciting about the synergy for you?
Well, FCAI in a way isn't there quite yet. We do have this like interdisciplinary components within the FCAI flagship. So FCAI is a flagship unit supported by the Academy of Finland, working on AI across Finland in principle, but we're hosted by the computer science departments by Aalto University and University of Helsinki, and then we have VTT, the Technical Research Center. So these are all very technical organizations that are the hosts, and this certainly sort of brings its own flavor into the type of work that we're able to do. And for that we need sort of to be able to sort of walk the walk when we say that we want to democratize and we want to make AI more get rid of the gatekeeping and do more sort of all around sort of from multiple perspectives and facets approach AI. We really need help from outside, and also we're in Finland, the diversity in terms of the population, lots of people look like me, basically, so that we're like white, colored, and
Accepting people like me somehow.
Yeah, well,
there's a lot of interesting diversity.
we try to do better. Yeah.
but I think what's missing is a more tactical approach to engaging diversity in the whole pipeline of the whole cycle of education, training, career support. There's so much that has to be done. So much that has to be done to actually make it work beyond just thinking about it as a tokenistic expression of diversity.
Exactly, right? Exactly, and that's all. Like Mia is all about that. Not having the token, well, be it woman or person of color in there, but sort of really, she has the sort of the experience, both personally and professionally, on how to make the change, and that's of course why we need help, and that's why we sort of value this partnership so much.
+1 to everything you said.
So just to wrap that, concretely, what are you planning to do? Have you already talked about some initiatives that you're going to create in the next couple of years? Well,
we're sitting here, so this is the first thing we agreed that, okay, we need to do this kind of opening of the conversation, and we wanted to have it sort of not sort of sitting on a big stage with lights and pyrotechnics, but rather sort of having this intimate meeting and having people engaged and sort of introduce one another. And I think we haven't sort of planned much further yet. There's education, especially since it's sort of what we both are very driven to do, but we'll see what follows. I don't know if you have thought about this much further.
I've been having discussions with myself. But no, that's the reason, one of the main reasons I'm here, that we will get to have those conversations in person and also include input from the community. But what's working for us, like what is our superpower, is our community is filled with incredible women who do incredible work. So it's not that much far of a leap to take their work and incorporate that into education. And the work that Teemu has already done with the AI literacy, it's such a great place for us to springboard off of. So I feel like the foundation's already been laid, but by the next time we have this conversation, that we'll have more to share about the specifics, like what we are launching and so forth. I'm looking forward to that.
Because I can imagine some very interesting components building on that awesome resource you have of women who can come speak at various events, who can mentor other women, who can, so like there's a whole network effect that can grow in the Nordic context. And so that's certainly one aspect that one can think about.
Absolutely. I have a long list of women to recommend who can come and speak and who can teach. And like I said, that's the power of a community. And it's a global community. We want to increase representation of women from Scandinavia. That's also my ulterior motive for being out here, so we can get more women into our community. But yes, to your point is...
we have a hard time recruiting amazing faculty and postdocs in our programs and of diverse backgrounds. So I think this is something that we also have to tackle, which is a real challenge.
And then I also have this like personal curiosity and wish that I could... I discussed this just over lunch, that there's this word Finsplaining that we Finns tend to do a little bit when we engage with sort of global debates and discussions, that Finns, we feel sometimes, or I think this is sort of a Nordic thing, so maybe it could be Nordic-splaining, we feel that we have sort of a monopoly on the utopian, like perfect world. And we maybe think that everything is sort of good and beautiful here, and then we people let's say in the U.S. where things obviously are all messed up, at least from where we're looking at things, we go and sort of explain, okay, well we have solved all these problems, so you should just look at how it's done in the Nordics, and that's good. So what I'd really like to get is maybe sort of a little bit
kind of reality check
feedback on those on sort of our Nordic-splaining
and the gaps in our research agenda and the gaps in our educational approaches. There are many things that we need to rethink sometimes in a global context, because Finland is not isolated. It's working in a global context.
But Nitin, should we now broaden the context?
Was there something you wanted to respond, and we can bring panelists on?
I will just say this. One positive, because I do talk a lot of diversity and ethics, and it's always easy to look at what isn't there. But I would say that our strength is our community, and the fact that I live now, like the country I live in and call home, I can speak openly about these things. That it is okay to criticize, it is okay to poke holes so that we can get better. So I feel like sometimes I'd get lost in the message because it's like, how can you be so negative? It's wonderful. Yes, there are a lot of wonderful things, but we can't make progress if we just look at that. So I'd just like to leave it at, like, start the next session on that note.
So we have some wonderful panelists who actually bring a Nordic perspective to these challenges and opportunities. I'd love to invite them here. We have Minna Ruckenstein, who's a professor at the University of Helsinki in the social sciences. Please join us here, Minna. We'll go to the ends.
Oh, okay.
And Marja, who's Niemi, who's also a colleague of mine at Aalto University, and she's been leading our diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives at Aalto. And I thought at least the two of them can bring very different perspectives. And we also have Riikka Koulu, who is not here yet, but if she joins us, we will have her join our panel spontaneously. But maybe did you want to start with a question for for Minna, perhaps, or
Yeah.
to get us going?
Well, I just wanted to maybe go back to what Minna just said. We had a lunch, sort of warming up a little bit and sort of getting to know each other. And then the first thing she said to me when she, said, we know with Minna, our kids went to the same daycare and everything. So, so she said, Teemu, why did you invite me here? Because I don't do AI ethics. So would you like to answer what do you mean by that?
Well, actually, listening to Mia, I have to say that I'm pretty convinced. So you're not doing the AI ethics that I thought that you might be doing. So I have a course, it's called Digital Inequalities and the Ethical Turn. And what we do, not engaging with research that social scientists have done for centuries. So the idea is that you cannot find ethics in algorithmic biases or transparency debates, or because that's not it. That's only one aspect of it, and that can be very important if you're actually designing algorithms. But if you are talking about tech in society, all the things that Mia was raising, they're the ones. So we are actually not dealing with ethics, we are dealing with politics. You are avoiding politics. Maybe it sounds like too offensive in the kind of the tech industry context, but we talk about politics when we talk about also ethical debates and what gets to be included in the debates. And I think that one of the interesting things here is that is underlining your talk is that we are talking about some sort of attack on civic values, which is not only about diversity, but it's about do we have autonomy when we operate in these tech spaces? Is there enough openness in these spaces? So civic values are pressured in a lot of different ways, and now we have to deal with this issue. And I think this is a absolutely huge challenge, not only for women, but also for men of different ages. That how do we grapple with this new situation where tech and they're doing something to them in that process, and we have to somehow figure out what this new society is. What is it like, and can we maintain our civic values when they are being pressured by market values and something that I call the project value, that it's good to break things and just go forward. It's not good for the society to break existing institutions. We have to think very carefully because breaking is so much easier than building. So,
Well, Minna is also being a little modest because I saw a lot of Minna's work. She's come and spoken at our research lab, in our seminars, and I just went to a conference in Copenhagen that Minna co-organized on automated decision making, which was the fantastic thing about that conference was we had social scientists, we had researchers from very different fields talking about the same sets of larger challenges. And I think having computer scientists like us in that room was super crucial to get a much wider perspective of the socio-technical systems within which we're operating, rather than just the kind of pragmatic problems we think AI systems have to confront in being able to optimize or whatever they do. So maybe you can speak a bit about that initiative and the way you've had to construct that.
Yeah, so of course, it depends on the context because within a company context, something that can be narrow. Like you have to think about how do I talk about gender when we have this model, for instance. So that's a contained problem. But then if you think about in terms of society, that what kind of society we want to build with these systems, then you have to start looking at much broader questions. So one of my projects funded by the Finnish Academy, it's called Rehumanizing Automated Decision Making, where we are actually showing that humans are the ones who build these systems. So there's, for instance, one thing that we are kind of trying to make people aware of. It's called Ai methodology, and Ai methodology is because I'm like this, the users are like this too. So how do you actually see that there are different kinds of people there, and how do you when you think about the different people, they're not all related to your life conditions. And I think that this is also interesting, that when you talk about people who work in tech companies that have a global reach, they often notice this when they launch their products in different markets, and they're like, oops, the way we listen to music in Spotify is not the same that they do in India. They somehow make it into a communal practice. So we have to kind of understand what is this social aspect there. So of course, people do think about these things in companies, but it might be easier if those things are thought about before you start building these systems, because now it's kind of like individual people are tinkering with these systems and trying to kind of make them fit into their worlds. But what if, when you're designing something, you actually look at what might be happening? So I recommend Data and Society Institute in US just came out with a report which looks at cancelled projects in the automated decision-making space. And it's really great because it shows that these systems might not be as efficient as they were supposed to be, and also they have huge problems in terms of civic values. We talk about predictive policing, we talk about child welfare cases, and what is a kind of the logic which what happens is that somehow these systems are targeting the most vulnerable in the society, stigmatizing them further. And this is something that we cannot find from the algorithmic bias debate. We actually have to look at what is happening between, for instance, if it's public sector, what is happening to the relationship between the citizen and the state. Is this something that actually increases the citizens' trust in the society? Is the society on my side? And this is the Nordic thing. In Nordic countries, trust between the citizen and the state is the highest in the world. And sometimes it feels like we are like the last island, and if we're going to mess this up with these algorithmic developments, I'll be really pissed.
And that's what also makes the Nordics so competitive in my mind, is that they have this interesting model of how we can do good governance with transparency. And this is why organizations in the Nordics are very careful in how they adopt AI systems. And as we are interviewing them and getting to know the way they do this, I think this is the competitive edge the Nordics can bring. Just like Apple says, we build trustworthy devices, the Nordics can say, we build trustworthy AI systems, but it takes a lot of socio-technical analysis to be able to get to that stage.
Yes.
And we need a lot more nuanced research around that.
Yes. So there's some Nordic researchers who are looking at what happens in these projects. Is that something that starts with a kind of a big idea that, okay, so now we're going to build these big systems. And then in the end you have something very small and it feels like, okay, so is that what we came up with? But it actually might be a good thing, because then it means that even though, people say that public sector, so much inertia and, nothing is happening, that's democracy. That's democracy, that we actually try to make things that will work in the longer run. Of course, saying that, I think public sector could do like much better tech development. There's a lot of stuff that is just, you can see from the beginning that it's not good. Too many promises and too little resources and all kinds of things. But at least, this ethos that we want to do things in a societally robust ways, that is a good thing to have.
Thank you, Minna. Maybe I can bring Marja into the conversation.
Sure.
You've been leading a lot of initiatives around diversity, inclusion, and equity at Aalto University. Can you tell us a bit about the way those have been initiated and the challenges and opportunities that have emerged from that?
Sure. I've been in this position. I'm the development manager of the School of Science in Aalto, and kind of responsible for equality, diversity, inclusion matters on the school level, and also part of the Aalto level committee dealing with these matters. And I've been in this position now for more than 7 years, and there has been a huge change in Aalto. I think during this time it was a very different scenario in 2015 when I started, and there's been a big change on Aalto level. I think these things are now in the strategy level taken into account. The leadership is kind of involved and committed to these matters, and it's in the policies and really kind of in the core of our strategy, I would say. But I've been more involved with our kind of more grassroots initiatives that we've done in the School of Science or initiated in our school. For instance, Shaking Up Tech event that we are now having for the 4th time in a couple of weeks is meant to encourage women specifically to the field of technology. So this is an event for high school students, and that's now done in collaboration with other universities as well, so grown bigger from the initial event in 2018. We have started a fund in the school to encourage people from the grassroots level, from the departments, whoever in the school community, to come up with their ideas and start initiatives that would support diversity and inclusion in the school. Like Nitin, you have applied funding for your projects there.
The Color of Science initiative came out of that. Thank you very much for supporting that. And we have Enrico here sitting in the back, who also runs an initiative. You can tell us about that.
Making Waves initiative by Enrico is also funded by this fund. So these are both seminar series where we try to bring diverse voices of different topics in the core of our school to show that there is representation. We are not doing very well in sense of representation. Say on professor level, we are doing better now. There has been like development within the past few years, but representation via these seminars is something like a low-hanging fruit that we can do to show the students, show the people that this is not all white men who are doing these things in our fields.
So would you say that there are maybe two sets of areas where Aalto could, for example, do more? One could be in the, I don't hate to use the word pipeline, but of bringing in really talented young women and people of marginalized backgrounds into Aalto to begin with, into our academic programs, into recruiting interesting postdocs and PhDs, but also at the higher levels of professors and leadership. How can you infuse that with, again, minority, diverse backgrounds? I mean, what are the concrete challenges you've seen with that, and what you think leadership has tried to do to change that so far?
Yeah, I would say that we need to do a lot more on all levels of students, faculty, all levels of the academic career path, really. This Shaking Up Tech was pretty much the first initiative that we started, and what I noticed when I came to this school, I actually studied textile engineering myself and then chemistry, so that was like, textile engineering, all women, chemistry 50-50, and then moving to the School of Science, I noticed that, okay, this is a real problem here, that the student base is not balanced at all. So that's the first thing to do. If we don't have women in starting their studies, or well, people of diverse backgrounds in general starting their studies, then the pool where we will then choose our professors and so on will not be sufficient to make a change. But yeah, that will be a very slow change if we only focus on that. So yeah, we need to do something on all levels, and we have done a lot also, I think, for the recruitments. Like I was just looking at the last year tenure track recruitments in our school, in the School of Science. We hired 7 professors and 4 of them were women, 3 men. So that's already looking kind of promising for the future. But yeah, like I was saying, the leadership is committed. We are kind of changing the policies on the career paths, and so that they would take more kind of diverse talent into account, and not to, well, I'd say we are very much still focused on excellence, so there is something that we need to look at critically. What else is there that we need
legally,
to...
our universities cannot hire people of a certain
yes.
ethnic background or gender, and that constrains the approach we have to take.
Yes, sure. Yeah.
So here maybe I thought I would bring Mia back in, because working in the US context, Mia, what have you seen have been really promising approaches that have had effects in improving diversity in organizations, and what could we in the Nordics try differently perhaps?
Great question. There are organizations like ours that work on, like, for example, Black in AI is a great one. There's a Queer in AI. So all of these organizations do a really great job in supporting their communities, elevating their work, and they are cross company, across universities, and they have what's important, I feel like, needs to be called out is this critical role that a community plays. And I feel like it's always understated and underappreciated. But when we work in an environment where we are still trying to make progress, we're not at 50-50 yet. We are talking about a person, queer, trans, woman, non-binary. They're going into an environment that they're alone, they're the only person, they're the first diversity hire. It can be a very daunting place. So the feedback that we get from our own community is that I feel safe, I feel like there are others like me. So suddenly you feel the experiences that you have are not that unique. You're talking to someone else, hey, that happened to me too. So just that knowledge sharing, that solidarity, that knowing that, okay, I'm alone in this room, but I have someone out there, my lifeline, my support system that I can talk to. I feel like that has made a huge difference. And also, people who are within these environments feel safe and they pull others in. And there was actually an incident during we've had a lot of protests, we've had a lot of racial injustices which have been brought to light over the last 4 years, so 2016 to 2020, there's been an escalation. And there was an event at Oxford. And I remember there are students at Oxford, Black students, who did not feel comfortable inviting others to that university because of the university's response and treatment of Black people. So I feel like universities who create an environment which is welcoming to people of color, to women, are more likely to be successful because that just has this amazing network effect, and the ones who build support systems are just more successful.
Yes, please.
Yeah, this is quite interesting to me as well, because I was interested in technology, and not many women in social sciences are. So I have been the only one in countless meetings. You know, I'm talking to professors of computer science, and I'm trying to make them understand how I feel about things. So of course, you know, I was drawn to others like me, And if you look a little bit aside of AI tech scene, and you look at social scientists who look at these developments, we call it datafication processes, or we talk about critical data studies, and all of a sudden women are all over the place. So I tried to analyze, why this is, and I came to the conclusion that when we started with these topics around a decade ago, we were all marginal in our universities or our research community, so we had nothing to lose. We were like, okay, so there's something interesting happening here, let's go and see. And now we are all widely successful when it comes to research money, for instance. I've had 100% success rate in the last 4 years, which is
Minna just received
already insane.
A very large SRC grant last week.
It's insane. It's insane. But this has happened to all the other women as well, who I have been working with. We all have big groups now, and we have all hired, I would say, women who represent not mainstream Finns in any way. So I have people in my group from Serbia, Taiwan, China. I worked with somebody who was Russian, grew up in Bulgaria. So I think it has been also really, really interesting that maybe for certain kinds of topics, as you were telling also, that when you have your own experience, you have the sensitivity to actually go into these directions, that you have it's almost like this weak signal that something important is happening, and you have nothing to lose. So you can start kind of tracing it, and then you find others who are doing the same thing. So I also feel that it's a really amazing moment to be in, to look at these things, because there's more and more people who are thinking like us, so it becomes easier in that sense. So there's people who are responsive to these things. They get good positions at the university, and they can push these things. So I'm quite optimistic, because never during my research career people in the tech field, for instance, have talked about ethics, which I would term politics, as much as they do today.
And I know Minna, and she's not always optimistic. So this is actually, it's not like it would always be Minna saying something positive. Like, she can be sort of very outspoken and outright about things.
It's just a small comment, like reflecting on what you were both saying, that it's the same when we invite these high school students to Aalto for this Shaking Up Tech event. We invite them from all around Finland. They come from small towns where they may be the only girl in the class of advanced physics or advanced chemistry, and then they come to the campus and meet like 200 other young women who are interested in the same subjects, and that's what we hear from them, that this was really a major thing about the event. So.
Hi Riikka, you've just joined us, so thank you for joining us. Riikka Koulu is a professor in law at Helsinki University, and also runs the Legal Tech Lab. And I just wanted to invite you into the panel discussion, as we were talking a bit about how we think of inclusion and diversity issues, but also think of the role of how AI ethics is becoming much more multidisciplinary as a field today. So,
may I? Yes. Thank you. First of all, my most sincere apologies. There was an emergency with childcare duties, and hence I couldn't even say anything beforehand. But the situation is now under control. But I know this is highly impolite, and I'm sorry to disrupt it all.
Priorities. It's I understand, of course.
Well,
exactly.
Ethics of care. But if I try to jump in straight to the discussion, I think it's a good point that AI ethics is becoming a much more multidisciplinary discussion. But coming from the background of law, technology, and society, something I find even more interesting, and what could possibly be my perspective to this discussion, is that AI ethics is rapidly becoming also a question of AI regulation. And what I would like to bring to the table is the question of what can legislation and law and regulation on national level, European level, and a global level do to increase this diversity and inclusion questions. And of course, what is the advantage of law in these questions is that law has the whole monopoly of violence that it can engage with, and it can force people and developers to include these perspectives. So that could be something that we as a community could direct our gaze towards.
The discussion had come up earlier that we need perhaps some regulatory frameworks to encourage companies and organizations to take diversity more seriously. I don't know whether that's the only tool we can use, but law certainly also requires human rights and also requires equity and all of those principles that we believe in to be a mandate in how we regulate ourselves. So certainly it has an important role for us in terms of how we think about this issue. Maybe I can keep passing the mic around and we'll ask questions for each other, and then we'll open up to the rest of the audience too.
And I also wanted to, so I think there's one question that we can't risk not touching on, which is the question that, you told that you get sometimes from the audience, and we might get sometimes, we might get from the audience, but I will sort of make sure that we get to this. How do we ensure that this is not just, let's say, women's problem or the minorities' problem? I don't think it's going to be very successful to think of the minorities sort of being responsible for the change. So is this something that is this going to be, okay, now I'm sort of going to pretend or or be the devil's advocate, so to speak. Is this against men? Right? So let me put this question and then anybody can comment. But Mia, you said that you dealt with this question a few times, so maybe you can sort of give your, I hear it's a diplomatic answer, so please, let's start at least with that.
I will try to be diplomatic. So I did get this question at the end of my talk last week at the Danish Technical University. And this gentleman came up at the end and said, "It felt like you're shaming white men." And he felt personally attacked. And I appreciated that question because he's asking a question that I'm sure many are thinking. So I was glad I got an opportunity to hear it and also respond. And my response is pretty simple. Is that I wish I lived, or we lived in a world that's more equitable. I wish that we treated everyone the same and the resources were distributed equally, but we don't. We don't live in a perfect world. We're making this constant progress towards it because we talk about it and we acknowledge it. But it all starts with that acknowledgement that there is a problem, that this is not okay. The reason we are sitting here talking about it because this is not okay. When so few people have so much, and so much power is concentrated in the hands of a few, something is not right. And unless we talk about it, be transparent about it, and point it out and say, okay, we need to work towards it, we will never make progress. Right now there are people here in the room outside who are like, I don't see a problem. I'm happy. We're at peace. Everything is good. We have an amazing prime minister. Right? Why should I care about what's going on in this group of crazy people in America? That's an American problem, yeah? Should I even care? But I feel like at some fundamental level, we realize this is a humanity problem. This is not just an American problem because we know how quickly these things get exported around the world. We are a global society. We can no longer say that's happening over there. We don't have to worry about it because you know sooner or later these issues are going to come your way. So the sooner we band together and work together on it, the better off we'll all be. This was my longer answer. My answer to the gentleman was much shorter, but...
I just wanted to say this week, Tim Cook visited the BBC in London, and he gave an interview. And the main thing he wanted to talk about in the interview was the issue of lack of diversity and inclusion at Apple. he actually admitted that Apple has done a very poor job of bringing more women into its workforce. Less than 30% of Apple's employees are women, especially in areas of research and tech development. And he felt that Apple has a lot more to do, even as one of the most recognized and credible companies on the global stage. So I think every company has to ask itself, what is the value of diversity? How should we actually support diversity in our workforce, not just of women, but of people of color, of people of marginalized backgrounds, of young white men who've had very poor resources and haven't been able to get to those places. So it's not an issue of gender only, but it's an issue of thinking very constructively about what can diversity add to a global workforce, to a different way of doing innovation, and then how do we create room for people from different backgrounds to do so.
One of the things that we could also kind of engage with, rather than the gender aspect, is privilege. Who can decide about what happens in these tech spaces? I think that's crucial, because having diverse workforce doesn't necessarily mean that people have any say. So I think we have to work with privileged, and why now? Why is this tech world so crucial here? Is because we've seen like an expansion of wealth that has been unprecedented in human history with certain tech companies. So the way they can kind of pool resources and use them efficiently is just like unforeseen, and basically states are being pressured by these developments, because the way they build infrastructures is everywhere. So we're dealing with questions of kind of like on different scales also. What happens in the organizations with diversity? What happens in terms of the whole market economy? Because also economists are worried, because there's no competition left. So these companies are so efficient that they can kill competition. So in that sense, I think Finnish guys, they wrote a book called "The Most Dangerous Companies in the World," and I can't remember, in which order they were, but all these big tech companies are amongst the 10 most dangerous companies in the world. And I really recommend reading it, because we need diversity also in the company level, and we don't necessarily have it if the way these companies operate is that they need to be huge, and they basically get to decide how other people are also operating their companies. So this is a big thing, and if European Union is able to do something with regulating these companies, it remains to be seen. But people have basically acknowledged that this is a problem.
If I can build on that, Minna, I really like your shift of focus from gender and ethnic diversity into privilege. To paraphrase that, I think it's also a question of power imbalances. And perhaps the original point, whether diversity is against men, perhaps the right answer is that if we look at privilege and power imbalances, we can then sort of transcend this dichotomy that it's men versus women, people of color versus white people, and sort of start thinking this anew. And I think reallocating power is one of those questions, and to also get to this point where the people who don't have the exact same background can also have a say in design and development of different digital technologies. I think their law actually plays a role. There is an ongoing scholarly discussion about the legitimacy gap that happens on the level of design and deployment, and I think that their legislation could actually push first towards transparency of these design processes, but also then sort of push for inclusion of different perspectives. I think the question is that it's not all men who are necessarily privileged, it's all context dependent, so sort of teasing out these different intersecting privileges and marginalizations would perhaps be a good way to frame these issues.
It's a fantastic point, Riikka. Thank you. I'd like to see if we can open up the floor to all the amazing people who are here with us here, who also have bring a lot of good perspectives. So we'll pass the mics around, and maybe we can take 2 or 3 questions at a time, so we can try to answer. The panel can answer them together.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah. Who would like to start with a question? Anna.
Hello.
Introduce yourself to everybody as well, just
Yes.
briefly.
Hello, everybody. My name is Anna Paula. I am a doctoral researcher. I work on the professor's Nitin supervision. I have a question for Riikka. So you were talking about how ethics has translated into legislation, and you were talking about national level and then European level. And for me, what comes into my mind is that then diversity becomes a problem. Because, for example, we have this Nordic utopian kind of sort of way of looking at artificial intelligence to the lenses of ethics. And then we have Southern Europe, and there you have countries like Italy, countries like Portugal, which are struggling with innovation. So when you talk to them about ethics, they're like, we're struggling to come up with innovation. We cannot put on top ethics. So why? Why are we expected to include this in legislation? And then you were talking about national legislation. So then you will have legislation that is from Finland or the Scandinavian countries that comes from one point of view, and then you have other countries that have a different point of view. Would that be something that will break the market of the European Union? What would you think?
Hold on to that point, and we'll pull a couple questions. And then we'll let you out. But hold on to that one.
Any others, maybe?
Other comments? Doesn't have to be related to this particular. Anything on your mind?
So I'm Patri Floren from FCAI. When we're talking about this problem of inclusion and then think about how big companies look at things, how can you translate this into what they value? That is it profitable?
Maybe one more if somebody wants to. Let's give it to somebody else and then somebody in the back. Yes, please don't be shy.
Hi, Irina Bakic. I was actually thinking about the kind of from university level kind of education perspective, like how, I mean, there's a lot of research and a lot of development happening within the university teaching space, and we know that, of course, kind of we have the people who are already in the industry, but what are the kind of steps and what are the points that need to be taken in kind of general, who are not part of your kind of research groups and under your departments, but more generally, how can we teach kind of university students to look at things in more ethical and diverse way?
Thank you.
Well, I can try to start. If I understood Anna Paula's question correctly, you were particularly interested about harmonizing regulation, particularly because there are so different perspectives in different geographical locations. If we are talking in the European context, which I'm most familiar with, I agree with your point that the Nordic countries are leaders in digital services and hence are developing legislation that doesn't have, well, any predecessors as such. And Southern Europe is facing very different level of technology adoption. But I don't think this is a problem only with technology, but I think this is a broader problem in the European regulatory landscape. So each harmonizing regulation faces the same problem of coming up with a sensible level of regulation that, well, of course it's a compromise that needs to sort of make sense to everybody. And different countries have different positions there. But I think, but one of the things that the European Union is now doing is that with the new AI regulation, they are trying to create a uniform certification system. And I would assume that what we are going to see is that that's a minimum standard, and some countries might do something different. And if we take from the European context and go to the global context, there is the phenomenon known as Brussels effect, which means that many countries who are not bound to the EU legislation still end up abiding to it. And I would assume that many jurisdictions are also sort of looking at EU with interest because it's also sort of a global sandbox for AI regulation right now. But of course, we hope that the democratic process is enough to include these different geographic processes. I hope this answers to your question. Quickly to Patrick's point, what is the added value with diversity? I've been looking at public administration automation quite a lot, and I would say that in that perspective, at least the added value is clear, because sort of if you have better working technological solutions and more diverse design, well, they work better, and that would be the added value. And then to the university level, I think the same answer applies as always. Research needs to translate into education and teaching, and that's how we sort of start building these perspectives.
Yeah, so if I have actually thought about a lot what is profitable for companies, and I think that it depends on the company. So some companies are completely happy, and it's good for them if they only design products for the men like who the designers are, because that's their clientele. So if that's what you want to do, that's okay. I don't think we should even try to go there. The tech bro products will be better if the tech pro products make them for tech bros. But the closer you come to civic values, the closer you come to, okay, so we actually want to do something more than niche products for niche audiences, the more you need diverse perspectives, because exactly like Riikka said, they will be better products for bigger audiences, or better services. So I don't think inclusivity is necessarily for everybody, but it is for many, or more. So I think that's in companies, they often think that they know beforehand what is profitable for them. So they ask before you have a product or project, what's the return of investment? And the truth is that if you do the project well, you actually don't know beforehand what it means in terms of return of investment. But companies tend to be very conservative when they think about these processes. So I think there's something in their processes that might actually work against them. And anthropology, it's always good to study anthropology if you're interested in ethics and politics. So that's what teaches you to think about diversity, ethics, and politics. So some studies in anthropology.
Also law. And technology. I wanted to add that, there are studies that say that diversity means better research results, means more citations to your research. So it is true that diversity is good for us university as well as such. But then considering inclusion and coming back to is this against men, I would think that all these actions for diversity, inclusion in university, in the working places is really to kind of for people's well-being, for the better workplace, and that means profitability, I would think. So it benefits also men when we focus on these matters. So I'll start with your question, and I do want to add something there. Is that technologies reflect the values of the society and the environment where they're built. And I've never been a fan of taking values from one society and dropping it into another. So the human rights, right? The UN has defined what human rights are, but not every country follows it the same way. Not every country has adapted a version of it. So there, to your point, there will be regulation that we can all, the basics that we can all agree upon, just the fundamentals, but every country will also have to adapt. But the thing with ethics is, the challenge is ethics does slow things down. Doing things ethically, I could throw a product out there tomorrow, and that's what's happening. And there are men who are throwing just products out there, they're getting 40 million. There is a product that just got 40 million in funding for erasing accents. There are contact centers in India and in Global South, and there was a company who's raised millions of dollars to erase and replace it with a white American accent. So, but to think about the implications, like talk to anthropologists or talk to anybody with a basic understanding of human psychology, how traumatizing that is, would have slowed things down. Would have probably, that like somebody should have just killed this product. This does not need to exist. But to do things thoughtfully will always take more time. It will always slow things down, and we will have to come to terms with it, and people don't want to accept that. And that is really the right way. Maybe moving fast is not the thing. Maybe we need to move slow, be more thoughtful. But that's a new concept. But then you said about, is diversity better? And I have come to the conclusion that I don't like providing financial justification or rationale for that. Because if we believe human rights and men, women, non-binary folks are equal, then isn't this just against human rights? But the practical thing is, if your systems are not ethical, which means they're not diverse, you're not including diversity, then that means your systems are also not accurate, because they don't work for half of humanity, you see? Because if they don't work with black skin, they don't work for women, they don't work for non-binary folks. If your gender definitions is male, female, it's not going to work. So I feel like there is a rational, practical, financial justification. But end of the day, fundamentally, I think it's time we just agreed, it's 2022, that exclusion of women and folks who are not the white cis male is just discriminatory, and we need to address it at a human rights level.
Can we take another round of quick questions, because I think there's probably more thoughts in the room haven't addressed. Please don't be afraid to ask. Yes, Salla.
Thank you. So I'm Salla Pongla from University of Turku, and this is not strictly a question, but perhaps I'd just like to hear your thoughts about the subject. I was thinking about the relationship between law and ethics based on this discussion, and because it feels like often many companies seem to conduct, of course, legal risk analysis, whether their technologies are like in accordance with the legislation. This was, for example, I talked with a researcher from the University of Tartu in Estonia, who was developing, part of the team who developed the tool for the Estonian employment and insurance fund, where they first seek, like, where the counselors give recommendations for or help people get jobs, basically based on AI recommendation, partly based on AI recommendation, I think. And they said that yes, they didn't really conduct any ethical risk analysis, but they did the legal risk analysis. And that's often the case for many companies as well. They are really strict with, okay, we follow all the regulations and we can show it like this. But it's not the same as being ethical. I mean, we often have this given that law is ethical. As long as you do in accordance with the law, you're ethical. I mean, how can we make sure that we go back to this discussion of like separating these things and actually discussing whether we want to work like in accordance with the law or if we want to do something else? What are your thoughts on this very broad question? Yes.
Can we take one more, and then we'll probably have to get responses.
Yes.
Any other quick? Yes, behind. Let's do that. And then we'll handle this.
Great. Thank you. Hi, I'm Ella Palo. I'm from Helsinki University. And I was wondering, you were discussing democratization of AI and technology. And maybe what are your thoughts more specifically on that, on how we can include especially more marginalized communities and people in that process, and what are like some more concrete ways of doing that, perhaps also outside of the university. So, yeah.
Let's start with the first question.
Shall I? Good reasoning. The demarcation between ethics and law. 2 points there. My first thought is that I find it worrying that we have this, that in the discourse there is something about considering AI ethics as like proto-law or like soft law or something less than law, and we can also see this on the EU level, how the regulation debate actually started with, hey, let's do ethical guidelines first. On that side, I would sort of like to make the point that they are separate. So legal compliance is one question, and ethical work culture or ethical culture in design and deployment is another thing, and the law sort of sets a minimum boundaries, and then ethics is something, it's reflection, like Mia pointed out, and it slows things down. Perhaps it's this move slow and fix things thing. But okay, they are separate, but then the counter argument or the complementary argument is that of course there is also overlap, as we saw again with the EU's from ethics to regulation discussion. So many of the ethical principles, transparency, explainability, oversight, accountability, these same principles are also sedimented in law, and they have always been there. And for example, if we look at existing laws that have nothing to do with technology, those values are reflected there. So they are both legal principles and ethical values. So of course there is overlap, and that's how it gets mushy. But I also see that that's one of those important points, that if we do legal compliance that forces you to take into consideration transparency obligations, it also kind of like might force a bit of that ethical reflection that we need.
Yeah, so I've been part of conversations about regulation, and I find myself sitting in these conversations and thinking that, why is this done? Why is this AI Act done? It doesn't make any sense. And it's almost like a train that you can't stop. There are hundreds of people, thinking about this poor regulation, from my perspective, because we actually have quite a bit of regulation already that we could be using in this. So there's this kind of like this AI exceptionalism that is kind of like, so the same as, in the medical field, they've been grappling with this genetic exceptionalism. It's all about genes. It's all about AI. So I think we are in an interesting space now with AI ethics, because more and more people are saying that, okay, so now we have tens of lists of, I want to be good person, human rights and inclusivity and autonomy, but they don't operationalize. So now we actually need to move into actual tools and things, and then we come to this democratization. And the democratization is interesting because in order to democratize tech, we might have to push it aside and think that, what do we actually want to do first? Not that we want to promote AI, but we want to do something good in society, and then we have these good tools for doing it and so the ethical democratizing thing is actually to build, not just say that, oh, we're going to build a better world, but actually try to build a better world.
So I'm really sorry, good friends, we're over time, and we try to be punctual in the Nordics, right? So we'll have to take the conversation offline after this point. I just wanted to give maybe Mia the last word. Perhaps if you have any sort of words of advice, where to go from here. Like maybe people are sort of following the stream and they're thinking, okay, I'm now inspired. What should I do next? Is there something they should, is there a newsletter to subscribe to? Is there a YouTube video or a book they should grab? Should they run to the street? Like, what should they do now? Now I think they're all stoked. So what do they do now?
I would love to see you all running out into the streets, Ben.
It stopped raining, so
it's beautiful, and I look forward to joining you all there. So first of all, Teemu and Nitin and fellow participants, and I have so enjoyed being here. So first of all, thank you so much for having me. I do want to say something about the ethics and the legal. Just the dichotomy is that there are so many things in life which weren't legal, but we knew there were wrong things, like slavery was legal at one point, right? So I do want to continue that discussion and have that about just what we need to watch out for. And on that note, I do have a weekly newsletter that goes out. It's about AI ethics. And my goal is to make all of the great research that's done in universities, that's done within tech companies, and there's so much knowledge collectively that's being developed. I want to make it accessible and understandable for more folks, for the non-technical folks, for the non-sciencey folks, for the non-legal folks. Make it in a way that this brilliance that we have within our communities is available. So some of those curated resources you can find in the Ethics weekly newsletter, but I also encourage you to vote for women, cite women, nominate women, hire women, pay women, and that's how we'll build a more ethical, inclusive world that we all want.
Thank you.